Hello, we're having some technical difficulties we're trying to resolve as quickly as possible. How's that?
Perfect. Yeah, it looks like that one's coming over.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and I'm sorry, very sorry for this this delay in getting started. Thanks for bearing with us. If a couple of you just could send a chat to us, just telling us to make sure you can hear this, it would be helpful, but I think we're okay now. Anyway, this is Steve Smith, and I'm the webinar coordinator. I'll probably get fired as a result of this, but and also a business mentor at SCORE Fairfield County. And today we're going to present the webinar Do It Yourself PR. Thank you very much for signing up. Our presenter today is Tom Martin, and I'll introduce Tom more formally in just a second. But first, a little bit of background on SCORE. I know many of you have heard this before, but please bear with me. SCORE is a part of the U.S. government Small Business Administration. It was started in the mid-'60s under the Johnson administration, with the purpose being to get the help of retiring or retired executives to help small firms begin their businesses and well as to flourish and grow. So we're still doing that, and we in fact have 325 some odd offices around the United States and over 10,000 volunteers. In Fairfield County, our office is at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk. We have over 100 volunteers with various degrees of industry expertise, business process expertise, and very specific subjects, and a lot these days on social media, as you can appreciate. We offer three main value-added services in the market. Our workshop program is done at the various the venue typically is the libraries around Fairfield County, and we do about 125, 130 of those per year. And we also do this webinar program, which you're a part of. We do 2 per month of the webinars, and I'll tell you more about the ones coming up in just a second. We also do one-on-one counseling and mentoring at our office at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk. And all of those services you can sign up for at our website, and it's a relatively new website, so make sure you've got the right one, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Fairfield County, one word, no dots, fairfieldcounty.score.org. So that's what we're about. Now, our next webinar is going to be May 16th, in 2 weeks, of course, and that subject will be hiring your first employee. You'll be getting email notifications for that, or I would encourage you to go to fairfieldcounty.score.org and go ahead and sign up any time. Now, one other notice about something coming up in the future is that many of you know in January we sent out a survey saying, asking for what topics would you like to hear, and one of the top 3 that came up was something we had not been offering, frankly, and that was time management. So we've put together a time management curriculum for the webinar program, and that will be offered on June 6th. So look for that one as well. A great interest in that topic for lots of reasons that I could go into but won't. Now, we're going to end this webinar sharply at 1 o'clock. I'm going to introduce Tom now, and he'll talk till about 1:15. And then as you hear him talk and you've got questions, please log them in the chat room, and I'll come back about 1:15 and kind of moderate that chat room, and we'll answer questions right up to 1, and then we'll sign off. After the webinar is over, you will be receiving an email asking you to evaluate the quality of the webinar. So thank you very much. Now, Tom Martin has spent 20 years as a network television producer, and he's worked closely with such luminaries as Diane Sawyer, I love her, Rose and Charles Kuralt. More recently, Tom has entered the PR field in helping others a lot of help with in services for entrepreneurs and nonprofits to help you achieve your needed and required media coverage. So I'm really happy to have Tom here today, and I'm going to turn it over to him, and I'll be back to you in 40 minutes or so. Here you go, Tom.
Great. Thank you, Steve, and welcome, everybody. Speaking of time management, I just want to say I'm grateful to each and every one of you for being patient. It's funny, as we're sitting here trying to work out that brief audio problem, I was reminded of the great comedian Louis C.K., and I think when he was on The Tonight Show or something, said, you're on the airplane and the Wi-Fi is out. Darn it, the Wi-Fi is out. Well, there was a time we didn't have Wi-Fi, so let's just be grateful for the miracle of flying, And so I'm grateful for the technology of webinar, and I'm grateful to Steve and also to my friend Bud Freund for helping me put these slides together for this presentation. And my intention over the next 45 minutes is to give you value so that you can grow your business, get your message out there, and really be heard. As Steve said, I spent 20 years as a television news producer, working with people like Diane Sawyer and Charles Kuralt and so on, and then the following 10, 12 years in the PR world. And it's funny, when I exited the TV news world and entered the PR world, it was very hard for me to articulate what it is that I do for people, and give an elevator pitch, that kind of thing, because I worked on, yes, I'll tell you briefly in a few minutes, worked on many different types of projects over the years. And then, pretty quickly it became clear to me that I am a storyteller, and I really love helping people deliver their message. There's something wonderful about being heard, being understood. We're all, I really believe we're each and every one of us passionate about something, whether it's our family, our favorite sports team, whatever. But certainly for many, if not all of us on this call, it's the career that we've chosen to enter. And there's just something wonderful about connecting with a wider audience. And so my intention today is to help you do that. And I've sort of divided this into three parts. The first part, I'm going to give you a little walkthrough of some of the media outlets that I worked with over the years. And when I was putting this together, I was thinking, oh my gosh, that's really self-indulgent to do something like that. And I'm always advising my PR clients, like, no, don't talk about yourself. It's all about the people out there. But in that quick walkthrough, I'm going to give you some examples of some thoughts that might be helpful to you. And so that's my intention. So hopefully it won't be too self-indulgent. And then I'm going to get into some examples of projects I've worked on over the years. Some relate to nonprofits on a national level or on a local level. Some relate to work I've done with authors, some with specialized professionals like doctors and so on. I know you all come from a wide spectrum of backgrounds there. So, and then sort of the heart or the culmination of everything is a 10-step process that I believe will help you get your message out, because as much as I'm proud of my work and everything, I love working with clients, this is really all designed to serve you. And there are a lot of things you can do yourself. That's why it's called do-it-yourself PR, to get your message out. But let's move right along. Let's get into the heart of it. So a couple of years ago, as a graphic designer friend of mine asked me to come up with a logo, there was sort of blank space on my business card. And so what can I put in the blank space? What's my tagline? Well, my tagline, it came to me pretty quickly, is connect, communicate, change the world. I think we all have a desire to make a difference, even if we're an inventor, and well, I shouldn't say even, but if we're an inventor and we've developed a product that can make life a little easier, a little more enjoyable, we want to get that product in the hands of as many people as possible. If we've gone to many years of medical school, we want to get out there and really make a difference. If we've putting our time and energy into a soup kitchen or a literacy program or another nonprofit, we want to really connect with as many people as possible. So that connect, communicate, change the world message is really something that's very important to me. And I think people are really looking for that today, maybe now more than ever, I would say. So let me move right along and say, what's the point of taking the time to do your own PR or to do PR at all? And the goal is really gives you a chance to connect with a wider audience and grow your business. It's funny, about 6 months ago, I went to a workshop up in Portland, Maine that was led by a good friend of mine, the guy who's sort of my marketing coach, Chris Brogan, who's based up in Massachusetts. And he challenged the 20 of us in the classroom, like, okay, that, these are the things you do each day and this is what you do for your clients, but what's it all about? What are, what's the message you want to communicate to your potential clients and so on? And it sort of came to me in sort of a sports metaphor where whether you're an author, an inventor, a small business owner, or even corporate executive, you like I said a moment ago, you put your time and sweat and blood into the work that you're doing. And if the metaphor is a football game, you're there on the 10-yard line or the 5-yard line. How do you move it forward? How do you make all of that time and effort worthwhile? And I really believe it comes from serving other people. So, these are our goals here. Moving down through the bullet points here, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell, the author who wrote The Tipping Point and Blink and a few other books like that. And in one chapter of The Tipping Point, he talks about people who are connectors. He talks about people who are mavens, who sort of are, if you're looking for a great restaurant, you go to your restaurant maven friend, and others who are salespeople. And I, for one, do not think sales is a dirty word at all. In fact, that's kind of what I do in PR. But we can all cultivate connections, and that's really done by showing an interest in other people. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move along today. I also believe there's power in stories, and I'll just give you a quick example up front. Over the years, I've done some media coaching for the CEO of Feeding America, their national office in Chicago, and my good friend Vicky Escara, who did a great job running that organization, came from Delta Airlines, and so she thought in terms of the macro picture, big numbers, number of people who went to bed hungry every night, and so on. And certainly that's important and dramatic. But I encouraged her in some of our media training sessions, media coaching sessions, to think about one-on-one experiences she had in these soup kitchens, children who were going to bed hungry, and the importance of making a difference, and so on. So, again, with all of my clients, I really encourage them to maybe even make a list on paper of stories that illustrate why they do what they do. And I'm going to talk again in a few minutes about sort of creating a before and after picture. But storytelling is very important. Also, why do PR? Because it gives you great credibility. We all know the value of testimonials and so on. Well, I can assure you that when you are, on your website, if you have an in the news page, that kind of thing, for people to see that journalists are interested in what you have to say, that gives you enormous credibility and can lead to sales and people willing to take a little deeper dive into what you're offering there. Providing value. I put in parentheses here the question, what's in it for me? And for 3 years, I was a producer for Good Morning America. Our producer, Shelley Ross, was the executive producer of the show at that time. And for every one of those 16 segments in the 2-hour show, she said, the audience is sitting at home asking that question, what's in it for me? Probably just like all of you are asking that question right now. So, okay, Tom, what are you going to teach me, and how are you going to make my hour worthwhile? So let's get right into it. Touching on, again, my background, and I'll just sort of give you a one-liner on each of these and why, it might be something to think about in conveying your own message to the public and to your ideal customers and clients. I got my start at the CBS News Washington Bureau. No, that's not me in the lower right. That is William Hurt and Holly Hunter and Albert Brooks. But that great classic movie, Broadcast News, was modeled on the CBS Washington Bureau, where I got my start. And I often went up to Capitol Hill to do stories about the economy and unemployment and issues like that. And if I learned any lesson during that time, it was to put a human face on things. So if you have a service or a product, again, when you're putting your PR hat on, you don't want to just talk about the benefits or the awards you've won and the special deluxe features and the casing and any of that. That is not important to the people you're trying to connect with. It's putting a human face on things. Then I moved on to do some work for the Public Television's Nightly Business Report. This was the time when George Herbert Walker Bush was coming into office. He was campaigning and just won the re-election. And again, lots of financial stories, which covering Wall Street and the various economic indicators that came out each month. And again, that can be a very, very dry topic, but as some of you may have picked up on the current healthcare debate, talk about reforming the Affordable Care Act and whatnot. When we put a human face on those big numbers, it really makes it very vivid and powerful. And again, I would encourage you to do that in your PR work. Then moved along to this was just a 3-month gig, but had a great time with Jane Pauley and Bryant Gumbel in China. They needed a number of producers to go to China. This was the days when the Today Show was originating, a week from Australia, a week from China, and so on. And so there, I learned the importance of a concise message, just like an elevator pitch is very important. People are not interested in sitting around and hearing you talk about your business for 30 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes. Give them a 30-second explanation that grabs them, that engages them. And, one of the stories they asked me to do for NBC in China was a 60-second taped piece on religion in China. Can you imagine that? But there was a way to do it. And if some of you still watch Bryant on his HBO sports show, he's a master of timing and so on. So probably my the job that influenced me the most was 7 years that I spent with Charles Kuralt, who passed away about 12, 13 years ago. I'm sure many of you remember Charles and his on-the-road stories. But he really believed that every single one of us has a story to share, a message, something passionate, as I said. And so rather than covering the celebrities or the politicians and, that kind of thing, he said, let's cut to the chase and spend some time listening. Let's not spend all the time talking. Let's spend time listening. And everyone has something that they're passionate about, and let's get into that. Moving along, spent even, like I said, I've shifted a lot of gears. Part of that time was with the Food Network, and you might think spending 3 years with TV Food Network doing stories about restaurants, one restaurant after another. Yes, I did eat well, but what I learned from that experience was that each business, each project is a bit different. One restaurant owner is passionate for a different reason than another, and so passion is really an ingredient that's really, really important when it comes to telling your story, and we will talk a little bit more about that as well. And then moving on to a CNN show called Movers, sort of a biographical show. People are interested in fellow human beings. One of my favorite examples of this, not necessarily one of the shows that I produced, but every 4 years we're fascinated by the Olympics. I mean, for the most part, unless we follow it, particular sport, intimately, a lot of these new faces of athletes we're meeting are totally new to us, but still there's something interesting about the human drama, that engages us. And I would definitely encourage you to share your story about, why you're doing what you do, why it was a dream for you, how good it feels to make a difference in people's lives, and so on. Because in a television story, radio interview, newspaper article, that really engages people. So don't be afraid to talk about yourself and share your own story. It really, really engages people. And then last but not least, I spent a few years with Diane Sawyer and Charles Gibson at Good Morning America. And if I learned anything from that experience, it was sort of that we're all in this together. I joined that show early in 2001, and of course in September of 2001 was the terrible World Trade Center tragedy. And I certainly have to give Diane and Charlie credit for, being vulnerable and human, and, the interviews that they did, covering that story that was, certainly so painful, they served as a great reminder that we're all in this together. And that's, again, a quality that I would encourage you to bring to any message that you put out there in the media. Then, need to talk too much about this, but then when I shifted from television news into the PR world, spent a year with Edelman Public Relations and a company called MediaLink Worldwide, and these were often projects working with big brands like Dell Computer and Ford and so on. And again, I learned that, it's hard for people to relate to a big, monolithic or mega corporation. So there's real value in putting a human face on it. So these days I tend to work more with individuals, and as you can probably tell, I love human stories and people, when people can express their dream, their passion, and so on. So I'd encourage you to look for that as well. So again, a little bit more about the benefits of why I would encourage you to take steps to get your message out there and to engage in this 10-step process that I'm going to teach you in just a moment. No one knows your business like you do, needless to say. And the people who've come up to you and thanked you and said, you've made a difference in my life. I'm so glad you're here. You saved me. I think we all have moments like that. Maybe not every client, not every customer, but when that happens, it's wonderful. And those are stories, yes, they can be testimonials, of course, but those also make good sort of pegs for a news story. And then I also believe that we all each, can't speak for every one of us, but I really do believe that we each have a natural desire to connect with the widest possible audience, to be heard, and so on. It's interesting. I was listening to a Oprah Winfrey in Deepak Chopra meditation just the other day, and she was talking about how, in the tens of thousands of people that she interviewed, she said every one of them felt good that they were connecting with that wider audience, and I really do believe it works that way, whether it's on the local level or national level or even international level. So it's worth the effort, I can assure you. Just a brief word on what PR is not. It's not advertising. As I said a moment ago, when you're thinking about, when you put your PR hat on, I would not think about, all the awards you've won and the new deluxe features of your product and, et cetera, et cetera. That's advertising. And, when you're pitching your story to producers and assignment desk editors and so on, they know that's an ad and not a story. So don't make that mistake. There is sort of a bit of a blurry line between marketing and PR because it's all about awareness. It's funny, several years ago when I would speak to groups, I'd talk about how we live in a TiVo age, that, isn't it wonderful that we can zap the commercials and just let them wash over us and not even engage, be forced to, engage with them. And now it's almost like TiVo is antiquated technology, but people are very good about putting their blinders on, so when they know they're being sold to rather than, being informed or helped or that kind of thing with no expectation of return, they know the difference, and they will give you their time if they know that your intention is really to serve them. And what I mean by reinventing the wheel is, I'm sure that in whatever field you may be, again, whether you're an author, small business owner, service provider, or professional, there are people out there who are, you notice, wow, they're really doing an amazing job with their awareness in our community or even on the national level. So, I'm a big believer in looking at models and what we can do and that kind of thing. So, moving right along. This, again, sort of like we live in a TiVo age. We live in an information overload world. I think it's funny with my friends here at the SCORE office here in Fairfield County, we were talking for a few minutes about typewriters. And it's like, I don't know if you ever remember reading those books about, here's what the future will look like, sort of like the Jetsons or something. And, the technology will free us. We'll have all kinds of amazing free time. It's going to be amazing. Well, I don't know about you, but I do not have tons of free time, between, my natural desire to engage in Facebook and Twitter and spend time with my kids and so on. So, I think just about everybody lives in an information overload world where the glass is not half full or half empty. It is full to the brim, and there's no room for anything else. And now that, thanks to technology, we can sort of pick and choose what stories we're interested in consuming because, there are only so many hours in a day. You really need to offer a message or a story that will engage people. Again, help them show some of the human drama that was engaged in, why you do what you do. So, because otherwise, there's no room in that glass, really. So what do we appreciate? And again, sort of going back to my friend Shelley Ross from Good Morning America about, the audience sitting at home saying, what's in it for me? Asking that question, what's in it for me? We all appreciate ideas and information that are relevant to our lives. And I know that when I write a press release, that's the first thing I think about. I started working recently with a fellow who wrote a history book about an early American president, and it's like, well, it's I respect the effort that he put into it. It's an interesting, fascinating book. It's certainly of interest to historians, but in my press release, already the path I'm going to be going down is how is this relevant to some of the issues we're grappling with today? Because again, there's only so much room in that glass. Again, as I also said a few minutes ago, I'm a big fan of actionable ideas. I know that some people, again, my marketing friend Chris Brogan kind of poo-poos, blog posts with the title, 5 most common mistakes and 7 things you must know about, such and such. But people appreciate bite-sized, actionable ideas. And if you pitch yourself to a television outlet, whether it's Good Morning America or News 12 here in Connecticut or something like that, I would encourage you to think about what bite-sized, helpful ideas can you share with people. And also, one of the great things about having an opportunity to appear in the media is people see you as an expert. They listen to what you have to say. They value it. They see how it fits into their lives. Granted, probably the majority of the people who consume that message or that information will go away, and you'll never hear from them again, but some percentage of that audience appreciates it and is interested in what you have to say. And before I recommend one book to you that I think you'll really find worthwhile, I want to recommend another book. I did not create a slide for this, but a couple years ago, thanks to some friends who go to a seminar that Tony Robbins puts together every year called Business Mastery, I heard about one of his presenters and speakers by the name of Chet Holmes, Holmes, and his book is called The Ultimate Sales Machine. And he has a great metaphor saying you go into a stadium, just figuratively, imagine yourself walking into the middle of a packed football stadium, and you're going to give them a 5-minute pitch or 1-minute pitch about your product. Perhaps you sell refrigerators or something. He said, just by the laws of statistics or probability, something like 3% or 5% of that audience is there, and they can benefit. Yes, I need a refrigerator. My refrigerator died last night. I need a new refrigerator. But that's just a tiny percent of your potential customers and clients. But if you can present, again, as Chet Holmes says in this book, if you can offer an educational message, a greater percentage of those people bear it in mind. It sinks in, it registers, because the information you're sharing with them is relevant to their lives. So that's something that I would definitely think about as you're crafting your own message. And again, in terms of a book recommendation, this book I think came out in 1984. It's kind of a classic when it comes to sales and persuasion. Highly recommended. Robert Cialdini, The Psychology of Influence. It's Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. And one of the things that he talks about, talks about several principles in this book. One of them is what he calls the principle of reciprocity. And it's funny thinking back, sort of to an earlier age, just as we were thinking about typewriters and whatnot, or the time before we had all this wonderful social media in our lives. Some of you may remember, going to an airport and you'd find people there, handing out daisies. It's like, here's a daisy, or whatever it may be, and great meaning, well-meaning people, nothing wrong with that. Why were they doing that? Well, it was the principle of reciprocity at work. Someone gives you something, we feel almost obligated to do something in return. Again, if you have an opportunity to do a 5-minute television interview or a 30-minute radio interview, if you do a great job of offering value and information, some percentage of the audience, maybe not the majority, but some percentage of that audience is going to want to engage in the principle of reciprocity. Like, wow, this is a great expert, and I have an idea for him or her. So it starts engagement, and we're going to talk a little bit more about engagement in a minute. Before you enter into this 10-step process that I can tell you about, you need to answer a couple of questions. Who is your ideal client or customer? Are there geographic considerations? If you're an author, there aren't necessarily any geographic considerations because anyone in the U.S. or internationally can buy your book, theoretically. But if, again, in a minute I'm going to talk about a dentist who I handled some PR for. He's based in Manhattan near Columbus Circle, and so he was looking for people who needed cosmetic dentistry work, and so we bore that in mind when we were reaching out and so on. So, geographic considerations may be important to you. Maybe it's, not quite as glamorous to be featured in a local newspaper, weekly newspaper here in Connecticut, as opposed to, on the Today Show or something like that. But, it all depends who is your ideal client and how can you connect with them. Also, this is kind of an obvious one. Are you a B2B, business to business, or are you going right directly to consumers and individuals? That will affect some of the outlets that you choose to target. Also, is your field sophisticated or specialized knowledge? I mean, again, perhaps an interview on Good Morning America is not the right fit for you if you're trying to target people who share your particular field and so on. And I'll just throw in the idea that there's some great podcasts out there these days, thousands, if not tens of thousands of podcasts. And several years ago, people were kind of disdainful of podcasts, but the fact is that is a great way to connect with a very specialized audience, if that is good for you. And then time constraints, not only making your message timely, if you're a life coach or what have you, New Year's resolutions are an ideal time. Perhaps if you're a florist or even a vacation planner or whatever that may be. Perhaps Mother's Day coming up would be an ideal peg for you. And so, that's what I mean by time constraints. So let me get into some examples real quick, and I'm going to run through these kind of quickly, but I think each one of these projects that I've worked on over the years will illustrate, a principle that you might find useful in planning your own PR strategy. One second. Okay. So, as I mentioned, this is for a product invented by a cosmetic dentist, Dr. Mark Leichtung of Manhattan, and he had also invented a device that helps improve people's smiles. And so instead of talking about, the materials and that kind of thing, we talked about, the transformation that's possible with a device like this. And again, there were no geographic boundaries here because he distributed it through various dentist offices throughout the U.S. And I had a friend who was a medical producer at the Today Show, and she said, yeah, Tom, we're actually thinking about sort of a showcase, sort of like you see for the Consumer Electronics Show, different products relating to dentistry and, improving your smile, taking better care of your teeth. So we were fortunate enough to be included in that segment, sort of a showcase segment. Also, Rachel Ray, an ideal client or potential client for or patient for this device is a young lady who's self-conscious about her smile. Sort of, again, individuals, a bit self-conscious about their weight. They might tend to sort of withdraw from the world a little bit, not socialize as much as they wish they could. And that was the case also with a young lady who Rachel Ray found, and she had a regular segment about people trying out different devices that could help transform the quality of somebody's life. And so we were fortunate to be included there. And it's great to have segments like this because this dentist was able to feature them on his website, and even his local patients, residents of Manhattan, were happy to see, oh, my dentist or my potential dentist was on the Today Show. He's on Rachel Ray. He must be great. Moving right along, I enjoy doing a lot of work with authors, and these days the field of self-publishing is really expanding. And a couple years ago did some work with two psychologists based in Los Angeles. They had self-published a book based on work they've done with some patients and survey groups and so on. Mean Girls, Meaner Women, about bullying and as well as sort of inter-office politics. And we were fortunate to get a 5-minute segment on CNN for that show because, again, as I said a few minutes ago, our pitch said, well, here's how it ties into the headlines right now. Bullying is really in the headlines, and here's some information that parents and teens and even female executives can benefit from knowing. So it was not like, hey, give us 5 minutes of airtime. We'd like to pitch our book, and here's how you can order it, et cetera. It's like, let's be helpful. And so there, and then again, as they traveled, they were, as I said, these two authors were based in Los Angeles. But as they each did some traveling, we were able to get some local TV spots around the country. Hey, I'm going to be in San Diego, I'm going to be in Las Vegas, what have you. And so that was very helpful. Another example, as I said, I love working on nonprofit projects. And if your business or if you individually are involved in helping the community, whether it may be Habitat for Humanity or a local soup kitchen or something like that, the news media really appreciates people who are interested in doing good in the community or doing good nationally. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I did a lot of work over the years with Charles Kuralt at CBS Sunday Morning, and even though a lot of people think, oh, isn't that a quaint old-fashioned show? It's not really hip and cutting edge and trendy and all that. All that may be true, but our audience really loved stories that gave them a chance to get involved. Like, oh, here's what a sewing circle is doing in Iowa, helping older people and people who consume stories, read the newspaper, appreciate things like that. And so when I did some work recently with the Prospector Theater in my hometown of Ridgefield, Connecticut, which was this theater was established by my friend Valerie Jensen, and if you haven't been there yet, I would encourage you to visit. But the point of establishing this beautiful renovated theater was to give jobs to adults with autism and Down syndrome and other challenges because they really just blossom in conditions like this. and it's their employment rate for individuals with disabilities is very, very high. So again, this is a nonprofit business. I guess maybe that's an oxymoron, but it's a nonprofit enterprise, and so we got some nice coverage on the NBC Nightly News relating to the opening games of the Special Olympics. We got a crew from ESPN to visit, and various other outlets, including here in Connecticut. And it was reminded people, hey, come buy a movie ticket, and you can support this great cause. So I think I have 3 more examples. I just check. How are we doing on time? We're fine on time. Good. I tend to talk a lot. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so another author that I worked with, again, a self-published author, my friend Ken Tenser, who's a business innovation consultant based in Toronto. Something that came out of my work with Ken that I think is, could be valuable for you to keep in mind is that, we wrote a number of press releases relating to, the stories that were in the news. Maybe, J.C. Penney was going through some changes at that time. And so we pitched, authors at Forbes and Business Week and the Wall Street Journal and so on. Here's an expert. Journalists are always looking for new voices and so on. And so we got some nice coverage by, sort of piggybacking on headlines in the news. And one of the most interesting things I think about the work that I did with Ken Tenser is that on his In the News page, was very, very busy. Every week there was another story or two, maybe an audio file of a radio interview that he did. Not everybody's going to stumble across, if you get a TV interview or radio interview, you're going to, connect with some audience who just happens to be, on that channel, so to speak. But you can, take an audio file of a radio interview or video or link to the station's website, because most interview segments or stories are carried on the station's website or the national show's website, and put that on your In the News page. And then as people are, weighing, 10 different innovation consultants, they say, oh, here's this guy, Ken Tenser. Wow, he's always in the news, month after month after month. The journalists love this guy, so they're going to want to take a look a little bit deeper. And this principle worked in a similar way. I did, to my friends here in Fairfield County, Connecticut. I helped when my children were going to a school here in Ridgefield Academy. I was on a committee to help sort of bring more interest to the school and that kind of thing. And how do you get people to check out a school? And so, well, if they're in the news or if there's something interesting going on, if they're being covered, if people have 5 websites side by side, and one of them, is often in the news, even if it's, the local newspaper weekly or something, people say, oh, this is worth checking out. I want to go a little bit deeper on that. One more example of how you can really make a difference in the world, if you are working with a nonprofit organization or volunteering or supporting them in some way. A few months after the tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, where 26 people were killed, I got to meet a wonderful lady, very inspiring lady by the name of Scarlett Lewis, and her son Jesse was one of the 20 children killed in that terrible incident. And so she said, well, I don't, there must be meaning here. What's the meaning here? What can I do after this point? And so Scarlett and her teenage son JT sort of went on a public crusade saying, it's the Choose Love movement. And she spoke even internationally, spoke in prisons, and she's just a really, really inspiring person. I feel honored to know her. And she had some conversations with one of our senators, Senator Richard Blumenthal, and even though it can be challenging to pass new legislation in Congress these days, she said, well, maybe we could encourage schools to teach emotional fitness in the classroom and so on. So, her impact, thanks to news coverage, was able to do that. And so here's my last example. I did some work with a foot and ankle surgeon, again based in Los Angeles, Dr. K, Dr. Khosrow-Ibadi, and he really was looking for patients in the LA area, but again, many patients would fly in to see him because he was a very skilled surgeon. So to some degree, he was thinking geographically, as I mentioned earlier, but not totally just geographically. And another important point to remember, perhaps as you're crafting your own PR pitch, is journalists love before and after stories. And when I was, during my 3 years with Good Morning America, I produced many different kinds of stories, and some of them were medical stories. And one that I often talk about when I'm speaking to groups is a story that we did about a new spinal fusion procedure. And we interviewed the doctor, the surgeon who pioneered this procedure, and we had the medical animation and so on. But probably 80% of the story, this taped piece that we put together, was of a gentleman about my age who dreamed of walking his daughter down the aisle to get married, but his back pain had just become so excruciating that was just not going to be possible. So thanks to this new surgical technique, he had all kinds of movement again, and we got video of him rollerblading and that kind of thing. So when you're pitching your story to the news media, think about who are the human beings that embody what you do. Does it lend itself to a before and after story? And we even got some nice coverage for Dr. K on the nationally syndicated show The Doctors, which I think has about 8 million viewers. So that was great. And again, many of his patients are right there in LA, so got on local television. Maybe he didn't need a story on The Doctors, but I'm sure he had a number of patients fly in, because we offered that kind of great before and after story. And sort of similar to that Snap-on Smile story that I mentioned a few minutes ago, a lot of people who, perhaps they've been in an auto accident and they're, basically one leg is a bit longer than another. It's a bit hard to walk. Their mobility is affected. They, become withdrawn. They don't want to go out. They don't want to socialize, et cetera, et cetera. But, the procedures that he offers sort of gives them a new lease on life. And so that was part of our before and after story, too. So let's get to the heart of the 10-step process. And by the way, you see my email address down there in the lower right corner. I've written an article about this 10-step process, so if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to email that to you. Just reach out to me. The do-it-yourself PR formula, the steps required to deliver your message to a wider audience. Again, step one, create your list of ideal media outlets and journalists. That may involve thinking geographically, as I mentioned. Who are the people, what publications do you read? What shows do you listen to or watch to learn about others in your field? Do you notice sometimes we can perhaps, I guess jealousy is not a trait to encourage, but perhaps there's a competitor who's getting some nice coverage. Well, what outlets are covering that person? You can get that coverage also with the right pitch. So you need to get sort of narrow focused. And sometimes if you just call a newsroom on the national level or local level, they'll say, yeah, just send it to newsroom@abc.com. Well, I hate to break it to you. I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, but that's not really going to get you anywhere. So there are tools these days like LinkedIn and Twitter. A lot of you just spending 10, 20, 30 minutes doing some internet research about who are the producers on this show. What other kind. If you look at their Twitter feed, not every producer or reporter or anchor is going to be there on Twitter, but a lot of them are. A surprisingly large number of them are, and you can get a sense of what their beat is. If it's all politics or war in the Middle East, well, that's not really relevant to me. But if it's about workplace issues or parenting issues or a fashion show or something like that, it's like, wow, this is a perfect person for my list. Step two, I say start with a compliment, not a story idea. It can be very tempting. Once you get that information, to just rush right in and say, here's my story. I should be on your show. It's like, I do not recommend that. One advantage that I have in my work is that over the years I've really cultivated relationships. I've brought certain journalists stories numerous times. I mean, just this morning, for example, there's a fellow who hosts a show on Comcast Cable in Danbury, Connecticut. And again, with all due respect to my friend, it's not the largest audience in the world, but he's a great interviewer, and it can be very helpful to get some video of you doing an interview, or this author, in the case of this author doing an interview, because then PR really does work sort of like a snowball effect. You get on some of the smaller outlets, and you can pitch that to. In fact, my friend Bud Freund, who helped me with my PowerPoint slides, was interviewed on this particular show, and so this gives you a little ammunition to turn it into bigger and better things. So again, you don't want to start once you find out, if you're in the real estate field and you always read, I think the publication is The Real Deal. Maybe there's certain reporters who cover your beat, and you're always interested in what that particular reporter is writing about, week in and week out, or a certain reporter in the New York Times real estate section. Again, send them a note saying, wow, I love the article that you did on such and such, and the next time you do it, you might be interested in talking to, this person, not yourself. But again, that's how you start building these relationships. And so it's never too soon to start that process. Step 3, visualize the story before you pitch it. That sort of relates to what I was saying earlier about the before and after process, as far as like that spinal fusion story and whatnot. A couple more steps of this 10-step process. Be succinct in your pitch. I mentioned that a bit earlier also. If you're lucky enough to grab a reporter or correspondent on the phone, that is not the time to go into a 30-minute monologue, but challenge yourself. How can you express your story ideas succintly? It's sort of like there was a great movie a few years ago about the TV, or not the TV, the Hollywood film industry, about called The Player with Tim Robbins, murder mystery. And so it's like one person after another going into the office of the Hollywood executive saying, okay, here's the concept. It's like Pretty Woman meets Die Hard. It's like, okay, I can visualize that. So maybe you don't need to be quite that brief, but see how succinct you can be. And step 5, again, these are very busy people. I definitely don't think that journalists are, up on a pedestal. I still think of myself as a journalist, actually, and we're certainly getting a lot of bashing these days, fake news, and there's kind of a loss of respect for journalists these days. But journalists are hardworking people, and they're a lot like you and I. And I remember again when I was working at Good Morning America, I'd get into the office maybe 8 a.m. every day, and sometimes those first couple hours just would kind of drag by. Like, well, what's the story I'm going to do today? I'm waiting for my assignment. Does anybody have a great story idea? On the one hand, journalists, especially on the national level, are kind of inundated by story ideas each day, which is why when you're writing your press release, you want to have a catchy headline so they can say, is this for us? Not for us. If it's for you, then we'll go a little deeper, read the rest of the press release. But so on the one hand, they're often inundated with story ideas, but then on the other hand, they don't receive that many well thought out story ideas. Again, going back to that, spinal fusion example of, well, here's the people that would be in the story, and here's when it can be done, and here's what your audience, here's why it's a perfect fit for your audience, and that kind of thing. And step 6, which is perhaps the most important step of all, is if at first you don't succeed, just keep trying, casting a wider net. I do all of my pitching individually, so I guess maybe in the old days, again, speaking about typewriters, a lot of publicists would blast fax. Well, I'm going to blast fax my press release to 500 journalists. Well, they don't feel engaged, and it's hard to tailor, all 500, one press release to all 500 individuals because they have different types of shows, they have different personal interests. I just find that does not work. And so it can be, PR can be kind of a frustrating business sometimes, or a frustrating process. But I would just encourage you to be, persistent and consistent. Make it maybe map out a 30-minute time block every week. That's when I'm going to do my pitching. I'm going to tweak my press release and make it a little more timely for whatever the season may be, or innovations in your field and that kind of thing. And steady and consistent and persistent, I think, is a good way to approach it. 2 more steps. If you are fortunate enough to be called in for an interview, and I'm going to believe that you will be because I think the information I'm sharing here will help you make that happen. Step 7 is it's an interview, not a tennis match. Okay, Tom, what the heck do you mean by that? Well, a lot of people, when they say, okay, I've clinched an interview, they said be there at 8 p.m. next Thursday. It's going to be great. I have 5 minutes. Okay. So they sit down in the chair. I wonder what questions they're going to ask me, and sort of like you're waiting for the ball to be hit over the net. It's like, oh, okay, I'll answer it that way. I wonder what the next question is going to be. That's not a really good way to prepare for an interview. I would encourage you to sort of envision logical questions. They're going to be basing it off of your press release, and so you can sort of, anticipate what the questions are going to be. I would encourage you to practice with a friend, record yourself, and, as I said, early on our call today, tell stories. Again, with a number of authors, I could give you so many examples. I won't get into that at the moment, but you can come up with stories that you can tell succinctly that make your point. And again, when you practice with a friend, if you might even have the friend, I wouldn't say throw hard questions at you or be argumentative or anything like that, but you sort of know the points you want to make during those 5 minutes. And if it's a 5-minute interview, that can really fly by. And so if you have a number one point that you really want to get across to people about sort of a new innovation that can help people and that kind of thing, practice that. And even if the question doesn't relate to the anchor or the host or your friend who's playing that role, ask you a question unrelated to what your number one point is, you can, with a little practice, you can find a way to weave it in. And sort of along the same lines, step 8, remember it's a two-way conversation. And so you might do a little research about if you know in advance the anchor person who's going to be interviewing you or the reporter. You can often find this information on LinkedIn. Where do they go to school? What charities do they support? Do they have kids? You don't need to overdo it, but people, we're, as I said before, journalists are human beings too, despite the current comment out there in the public. And so if you if you get to know who you're dealing with in advance, they appreciate that. They really, really do. So the last 2 steps, okay. Step 9, often offer a next step. What I'm doing today is reminding each of you that if you want the article that sort of goes into each of these points in detail, please email me. I'm happy to send that to you. I'm grateful for your time, of course. So, you might have a white paper as far as, thoughts about, innovation in your field or the new developments or, sort of the sky's the limit. My good friend Chris Brogan, the marketing expert I mentioned, often talks about, I think he uses the phrase a content upgrade. And basically what he means by a content upgrade is like a checklist of some kind or, points to keep in mind. One of the people in our group, that marketing group, owns a fly fishing lodge in Wyoming, I think it is. And so a great checklist would be if you are thinking of a family vacation and you've never done that before, what are some things you need to bear in mind to have a great experience? And, during your 5-minute TV interview or your 10-minute radio interview, you can say, if anybody out there is thinking of a fly fishing vacation with their family, I have this nifty little checklist you might be interested in. And then step 10, the final step, is gratitude. I'm a big believer in gratitude. Gratitude matters. It's funny, a couple of years ago, I used to enjoy listening to Oprah's show. They replay various Oprah shows on Sirius XM satellite radio, and she was interviewing somebody who had written a book all about gratitude. And Oprah said, I don't really get that many thank you notes. And I was flabbergasted. Of all people, Oprah doesn't get thank you notes. I can't even imagine that. So it's pretty rare, just sort of like follow-up notes and that kind of thing. So gratitude matters. After your interview, make sure you thank people, send them a note, if you want to send them a box of cookies or something, flowers, what have you. But, and if you're a great guest, a guest who's prepared and used the time efficiently, chances are producers say, wow, that was a great guest. I'd love to have that person on again. So we're almost at the end here, folks. Conclusion, 4 steps. The Nike philosophy. I'm sure you all know what that is. Just do it. So I think with the information I've shared with you on this call, you should really be prepared to write a press release, tell your story, paint a good before and after picture, think about who the specific journalists are you want to reach out to, and just do it. I've spent a lot of my life sort of being bogged down and being a perfectionist, and I think perfectionism can sometimes be paralyzing in some ways, and so just do it. Again, to be specific in terms of the journalist you're pitching, the tips you're going to offer. The way that I write press releases often has a little section with bullet points. This person is going to be able to talk about A, B, C, and D in an interview, and we don't go into all the details of the content of A and B, but bullet points, and so that really helps the producers and reporters and so on. Again, I mentioned earlier, there are probably role models and examples you can follow, people in your industry or field who have done a great job of making the most of the media. And then 4th, follow the formula that I've just shared with you today. And if you need it, if you need the article, let me know. Be happy to share it with you. And my last slide My email address, if you have any questions or anything like that, is tom@tommartinmedia.com. So thank you all for joining me, and I'm going to pass the line over to Steve once again.
Thanks a lot, Tom. That was excellent. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else on the phone did as well. I do have a couple questions, and while I'm trying to tee up these questions, I'll encourage those of you that are on the line to go ahead and put in a question. We've still got some time here. We're going to run over a little bit from the 1 o'clock because we got started a little bit late. First, being very patient was Guy Fatolo, who asked a question, Tom. It kind of goes like this. He's a helicopter charter company, and he wants to showcase the business on broadcast and cable television. He's attempted to contact a couple broadcasters without success. How can I put this is an interesting question, how can I put my business on an irresistible silver platter?
Okay, so we're starting with an easy question. Well, no, I have a couple of thoughts for you. For what you do, video is essential, obviously. I'm sure you knew that already. I would encourage you to make use of Facebook Live videos and YouTube videos. It's funny, another concept I often teach when I talk about PR is sort of don't sit on the sidelines waiting for somebody to give you permission to do something. I have a friend who is I forget if she came from Kansas or Nebraska, sort of somewhere in middle America, to New York City, and she was fascinated by restaurants, and so she applied for a job as a restaurant critic and really didn't get anywhere. It's like, well, you have no experience. Why should we hire you? But she didn't sit on the sidelines waiting. She created a website that was full of great restaurant news and reviews and videos and all that, and people loved it, and it just went viral and so on. And I would imagine with your helicopter tours, you could create some awesome videos, by not waiting for I certainly understand that it'd be great to have a regular segment on the Today Show or the Travel Channel or something like that. But I would just start shooting awesome travel videos. It's really appealing, and people say, "Wow, I'd love to be part of that." And I would, and I'm sure also you've probably concluded that you want to feature the locations and the experience and so on, rather than well, here's our the stats on our helicopters and stuff like that. I'm sure you've seen car companies like Subaru probably, who it's not focusing on the car itself, but more the lifestyle that it evokes and so on. So I hope that helps, but feel free to email me, and I'm happy to talk more about this topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I have one here from Lucy Langley who says, we are a nonprofit organization. What's the best way to contact the news networks and get them interested in you? Again, it's a nonprofit organization.
Well, another good question, Lucy. Again, feel free to email me. I would say, if your nonprofit focuses on certain medical issues, I would just do research on who are some writers and producers who maybe cover the medical beat, and then, again, if it's a medical issue in your press release, talk about how widespread and important, this particular issue is, how it affects so many people. Keep the human emotion in there. Just late last night, I tend to listen to the audio of CNN round the clock, but they ran a little segment on Jimmy Kimmel talking about how his infant son was born just the other day, and there was a heart defect, and it was just an emotionally wrenching experience, and how grateful he is to the doctors who saved the day, literally. And that's just human emotion that's really priceless. And if you can convey the work that your group does in that way also, it'll register with people. And if you can spotlight an individual, either a volunteer or someone benefiting from the work that's done, that makes it very, very vivid. And otherwise, I would just follow the steps that I mentioned during our call, as far as isolating specific reporters and correspondents and shows that have done perhaps work on this issue, the thing that you're focusing on. But if I can be helpful further, just email me, and I'm happy to talk about it. Thank you.
All right, Tom. Thank you very much. And this is really a good question. It's kind of almost a summary good place to end. Although I got a couple other things I want to read here to Tom. But I've never done a press release. This is from Peter McIver. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Peter. What is a good resource to teach me? Like typical content, who uses it and how do they use it? How do you distribute one? So press release.
Okay, great, Peter. Excellent question. Well, I guess I'll give you this real quick. Another concept that I often speak about is what I call the 3-30-3 rule, 3-30-3. And that means when you're writing your press release, if you have a big bold headline at the top and then a sub-headline and then sort of the body of your press release, in 3 seconds, a producer or reporter who you email it to is going to look at it and say, is this for us? Is this not for us? And I sort of touched on this idea a little bit earlier. And they will look at it, and if it is for them, just on the basis of that headline, they'll give it 30 more seconds to read, the first sentence or two or the first paragraph of your press release. And then if in those 30 seconds they say, wow, this really is for us, I'm starting to envision how it would look on our show, or how one of our staff writers for our magazine could cover this story, they'll give it 3 more minutes. It's like, let it really sink in. So it's step by step by step. So you need to, have a captivating headline. And again, I know, it's easier said than done. Maybe this advice is not the most helpful in the world. You just, sometimes it's by trial and error. Sort of like people who create websites, they might do, A/B testing. Well, here's some copy for one version of the web homepage, and here's some copy for the other version. See which one people really respond to, or like a Facebook, paid Facebook ad or something like that. So trial and error is part of it. But I would do that. And again, in terms of who you target, I would see who's already covering, that beat, or either that particular topic that you're focusing on, or sort of the more general field. And again, just very straightforward internet research will get you there. And again, if you get a list of 10 or 20 reporters and correspondents' names, you might look for those names on LinkedIn, and then again on Twitter, and you get to know an even deeper understanding of what they're about. And many of these people, again, on LinkedIn do share their email address. And sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge finding email addresses for every single reporter you might want to connect with, but a lot of them are there. And again, I do my pitching individually, so I would just encourage you to do the same. So I hope that helps, but feel free to email me as well if you like. Thank you.
Okay, good, Tom. Thank you very much. Now we're going to end the webinar here in a minute, but I do want to read. It's always good to get feedback, Tom. So here's something from Patrick Hale. Thank you for sharing your insights. Very stimulating in ways you probably didn't realize. I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. It doesn't sound bad, so congratulations on that. So listen, thanks very much for attending the webinar today. And again, I apologize profusely for the 10-minute delay we had at the beginning. So we've run over a little bit here today. The next webinar is May 16th. And again, the topic is hiring your first employee. And then I also teed you up for time management on June 6th. So again, thanks very much for attending. And a big thank you to Tom Martin for presenting. And please go to fairfieldcounty.score.org to sign up for webinars, workshops, or one-on-one counseling. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.